Namaskar, good morning from North America, and good evening to all the viewers and the community members back home in India. I welcome you again to the second episode of the Homeland podcast, season 1. So, as I already mentioned in the first episode, that the Homeland podcast is all about, it's a community outreach program, and we are going to reach out to all the stakeholders, all the community members, leaders, and especially the youth. So, without wasting any time, let me connect to my today's guest. And by the way, I have a very special guest today with me, Mr. Bhushan Bhat from Canada. Namaskar, Mara.
Namaskar, namaskar, madam.
And Bhushan ji has a lot of feathers in his cap. So, just give me a second before I just read out his a very brief introduction. By the way, Bhushan ji is a very senior community activist based here in Canada, and obviously, once we were out from Valley after the genocide of 1990, he eventually immigrated to Canada, and he has been serving the community here in Canada and is a very known, very senior representative of our diaspora here in Canada. He has done a BA honors in economics from Kashmir University, has masters in English literature from Kashmir University, and has started teaching English literature. Actually, has taught English literature in Kashmir University. I think at a very early age, and he has also served as the president of Kashmir Overseas Association Canada, and has been ex vice president of the Royal SunAlliance company in India. And you may panas to Khoshkara, he is associated with Panun Kashmir from the very inception. And it's an absolute pleasure and absolute delight to welcome once again. Namaskar, sir.
Namaskar, namaskar.
Bhushan ji, you start. Before starting, let me, because I have drafted some very important questions with for you, and obviously today's show is going to be more of a Kashmiri Pandit genocide testimony kind of a thing. So I begin with this question: who doesn't know the genocide of 1990 or KP genocide or massacre of 1986? Yeah, Yathis Batlut Shavana 1931. But I think all of us have also heard about Nadi Marg, Sangrampura, and Bandhama massacres. But in fact, incidentally, I mean, other than talking to you over phone, even I was not aware, and you told me something very, very important. I mean, it's very important, very imperative that we know all the massacres that happened with our ancestors, and not just 1990s or 80s, way back in 1947. Uh, and in fact, the time Yatheswanan is Kabul raid, but Kabul raid Yatheswanan, Magar, I think it was more of a Pakistani invasion. So even Kabul raid was not an apt term. It should have been a Pakistani invasion in disguise of the Kabilis. So, Bhushanji, my first question to you is, please tell all the viewers today, Ashwinu Mara, ye kya os, and what were your personal family experiences with the very important Chandrahama massacre.
Namaskar. I'm really grateful to Himalay and your team for arranging this podcast. I'm sure that in the course of time, this will become a very important record of what we have gone through in the past. And it is going to be very important for our youngsters and future generations. A great job, and thank you for inviting me. I really feel privileged to be here. Bumarawanode, I was brought up obviously in Kashmir, and my background, my ancestors, my parents basically lived in villages. My mother mara us from a place called Chandrahama. Chandrahoma is that one.
Chandrahoma.
Yes. To give you just an idea about where it is, Ashuti Srinagar Pete, Sopor Gasanchi, ya Baramula Gasanchi, Wachcha Akjaiwan, Patan.
Patan Palhalan, right?
Patan Palhalan is a place which falls between Sopor and Srinagar.
Right.
Now, after Patan is Palhalan, when you go towards Baramulla or Sopor, and then you go east, right, about 2 kilometers, there is a place called Chandrahama. Chandrahama was surrounded by other villages like Goshbuk, Aglar, Loilpur, and, this was like many other. You see, people don't know how we lived there.
Right.
This was a village where there were just 5 or 6 or 7 Kashmiri Hindu families, Kashmiri Bhat families, and they were surrounded by about 70 Muslim families.
Okay.
Okay. That is how most Hindus lived in the valley of Kashmir, especially in rural areas.
Exactly.
Timo isme Matamal, and we were, of course, not born then, but my mother was married to my father, who belonged to another village in Shadipura.
Right.
Okay. That's another aspect of it. But this is very important because people do not know about it.
Right.
When 1947 happened, and when Kabalis raided the valley, they came obviously from Mirpur. There it is said that many of the soldiers who were Hindus, they were killed by others, and they came through Kupwara and they came through Baramulla.
Okay.
Now, the first tragedy of our history and historians and ourselves, we also, Kashmiri Hindus, Kashmiri Pandits, do not know that 10,000 to 30,000 Hindus were killed in Baramulla when Kabalis came. Women were raped.
Right.
And in the, there was such great torture, it is not recorded. And
Right.
now some of the narratives are coming.
Correct.
Now, as these people came, many Kashmiri Pandits fled to the valley, and they fled to different parts of the valley.
Right.
They came to Chandrama, where this was a village of young couples, young people, and many of them were bachelors. So they came, and on 29th of January, 8 Kabalis came, because I have recorded the whole story recently from those who were there, who were first-hand witnesses. It's not a second-hand story, which is,
Yeah.
which has descended to us through third parties.
You
This is
you
a
have actually
direct.
interviewed the survivors themselves, right?
I was, yes.
Okay.
So they came 9:30 in the morning. They stayed there whole day, and they collected about 25, 30 pandits in the top floor of of the main house,
Yeah.
Kearney pattern.
Anyway.
And at 4:30, after looting and after doing, stealing
Vandalizing.
everything, they even searched women, and took off their jewels and other things.
Mhm.
So they killed them one by one.
Mhm.
And 20 people were killed that night. Many of them did not die that day. Some of them died after 15 days, 2 days, 3 days, 16 days. It was the greatest horror story
Mhm.
which happened in 47, which people do not know about. Now, how am I connected with this? How do I know about it? My mother was from that village, and she had 3 brothers who were killed on that day:
Oh my God.
Dinanath, Prithvinath, and Darshanlal.
Right.
Okay. And Dinanath was the only married person. He had 3 children that time. The eldest was Bansilal, who was 12 years old. He was a witness, he survived. Another was his cousin's son. He was 14 years old, Arzanath. Bansilal is alive today. He's 88. And then Arzanath and his brother Omkarnath. Omkarnath was shot in the leg and in the arm, and he was neglected for days. In his own words, he had worms, developing in his wounds. And he was taken to a hospital in Srinagar many days later, and he recovered and he lived all his life. Now, why am I saying this? Because we think that this all started in one day. This all started on the 19th of January, 1990.
90. Yes. Correct.
No, nobody knows about this incident. And if Vandahama happened on January 26, 1998,
Right.
remember, Chandrahama happened on 29th October 47,
Way back. Yes.
way back. And I, 3 of my mamas were massacred many years before I was even born. And that time, what was very, very shocking, and that time, is that they developed a story. Oh, all this was not right. That Muslims of the time, they tried to save them. They told us false stories about the true
Right.
history.
that the local Muslims actually tried to rescue
Yes, which was not a fact. That is why I recorded this
testimony.
everything from Mr. Arzanath,
Right.
and he passed away actually after that. I recorded it on 1st of March 2020 when I was in Jammu, 2020,
Almost
just before
almost
COVID.
COVID time, beginning of the
Yes,
COVID.
beginning of COVID time, I have recorded all these facts.
Mhm.
And he told me such a horror, heart-wrenching story that you cannot, but cry, when you hear that. And this date, the greatest tragedy after that was after some months, these people had to go back and live in the same village. Yes, I'll come back to that point.
Yeah.
Every single Muslim of the village participated in that massacre. They egged those on. They encouraged them to, they showed them the houses. They pointed out who the Hindus are.
Full
They
support kind
pointed out, yes, and they, according to Arzanath, and I have that, there were almost 500 people surrounding this small group of people
right,
and these few houses, and they were watching like it was a theater in action, you
right.
know. And after they had looted everybody, they asked them to come and loot them, and they also looted them.
So it
Now,
is in other words, it's even worse than the Taliban style of execution or the ISIS kind of execution. It's very horrible.
absolutely, absolutely. And
Horrible.
what
Even listen.
what is absolutely shocking is also how can a an apparently peaceful togetherness, peaceful coexistence where people live together turn into monsters in hours,
Right.
in moments, and then start killing their own neighbors. This
Horrible.
is a question which baffles me, and one can probably never answer.
Right.
So that lesson has to be kept in the annals of history. I'm writing greater details about it, and I have the videos, I have the names of everyone, I have the interviews of everyone. We are going to talk more about it.
Right.
And I again say that Chandrahama comes before 29th of October 1947. Vandhama comes on 26th of January 98 later. And Nandimag later comes on 23rd of March
March.
2003.
And
2003.
you said it was 26th of October, right?
It was 29th of October because I
29th.
just, yes, yes, yes. Because
29th.
why I had to connect all this, they said that was Purnimashi,
Oh, okay.
you know. So it was Purnimashi, day of Purnimashi. I checked it, double checked it. Some people didn't know the date,
Right.
but I got it corroborated, cross corroborated, and they said it was Purnimashi of October of 1947. And it coincides with the dates when Kavali is raided,
Yeah.
when the instrument of accession was signed,
Right. Right.
and when they kept coming, they reached Shalteng. They could not go to Srinagar.
Yeah.
That's why people in the South Kashmir do not know about this tragedy.
No.
People
Yes.
in Srinagar do not know about this tragedy
Absolutely.
because Kavalis were stopped in Shalteng and they could not come further when the Indian, the Prime Minister sent the Air Force and they started bombarding their bases.
Right. Absolutely. And I think seldom anybody knows about this massacre. And I mean, unfortunately, so sad, but it is true, and it is something which is very unknown, very unsung. And if I may just add that Purnamashi, converted into a bloody moon that night, and the way
Mhm.
you just narrated it, Bhushanji,
Right.
one more thing, I would really like to know from you. Apart from this, were there any, like you said, almost there were like 20, 21 killings that
20 killings. Yes, yes, yes.
killings. And like you said, I mean, the locals actually surrounded, they encircled, and they were like, it was kind of an open theater drama going on, as if they
Mm.
were not just killing, but some sort of an entertainment with the moral support from,
Mm.
the neighbors. So all in all, I mean, this is so even horrible. This is actually, it chills the spine that, then they had to,
Mm. Mm.
one, they had to see the face the massacre. Second, they had that trauma. Third, they had to run away, and then they had to come back and live in the same. what I mean, when you actually, I mean, this is very interesting because when you recorded all the testimonials, were they, I mean, what were their thoughts? Was there not even a good leader who came to their rescue or some? Because we have these kind of false narratives that the local Muslims, just to uphold that secularism, that Kashmiriyat, which we are actually victims of. So from those testimonials, did you find any such episode where there were any genuine rescuers, or there weren't at all?
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. Later on, as I told you, there were false stories, that were told to children like us who were born later.
Mhm.
But I can tell you that the shadow of this tragedy lives even today in the minds of those who are survivors. You see, this village had about 5 women who were pregnant.
Right,
Okay, it had very young, small children. It was a village of very young people.
right.
And my mother, during the time she, virtually died because of this tragedy, I can say, she would never refer to her brothers as Dinanath, Prithvinath, or Darshanlal. She would say in Kashmiri, Bodhu, Munjim to Lokut.
Lakut,
We never knew the names of our mamas.
Ramajis, right,
It had such a deep psychological effect on her.
right.
And she was a great woman. She never wanted the shadow of this to come on us. But that, regardless, the shadow of the tragedy did fall on everybody who was born afterwards
Yeah,
or who lived afterwards for years and years. They're absolutely, that's what I'm saying. A story was created that uh, all Kashmiri Hindus were asked to be in one place, women were asked to leave,
right.
and Pandits were asked to be there.
Mhm.
And when Kabalis came, they were told, oh, they are our brothers
Right,
and they are not our enemies.
right.
And uh, they have Islam, they will accept Islam.
Yes,
And then somebody who was kind of a villain,
right.
when these Kabalis were leaving, somebody informed them, no, 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 the people you saw in that area, they're all Pandits. So they came back and killed. That was
Yep.
the story. It was an absolute lie.
Perhaps.
Basically, they had encouraged, they had participated, and they had guided and provoked these 8 people, Kabalis. And mind you, those days, this is a horror story, they
Right.
didn't have those automatic rifles which killed people very quickly.
Quickly, yes.
They
Important point.
had those one by one, they started killing, and some women survived because they were in different fields. And when they started, when they saw the commotion and other things here,
Yeah,
they hid themselves there.
right.
Some of these children were also rescued, not rescued, but they survived because of that.
Somehow, right,
But basically, the whole thing was guided and it's recorded history, and
right.
that's so unfortunate. And
And like, I mean, Kashmir Files was just a speck. I mean, we have so many Kashmir Files, waiting. I mean, in
we
storage.
have so many. Actually, I got to know about it a little bit late. When I had done this interview, Vivek Agnihotri had actually completed his script. I spoke to Sushil Pandit in Delhi that time. I told him I have the story. He
Right,
called Vivek, and Vivek had already finalized his script.
right.
Otherwise, maybe it was really probably another 2 or 3 Kashmir files should
Yeah,
be made, to record all these facts, unknown facts.
absolutely, absolutely. Because this is such a spine, I mean, chilling anecdote. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Bhushanji, you also mentioned that you had a stay in Kashmir, I think, in the decade of 80s, from 1981 to 1990. And, I was talking to you last day, and you told me that actually you were forced to leave Kashmir. In fact, you left in 1991, if I'm not wrong. So
Yes, yes.
let's talk about that. I mean, tell us more about, because probably you have that first-hand account or witness of that mindset that was there. हम साथ इस कशीर इस बोझां की ए काफिरो ए जालिमो कश्मीर हमारा छोड़ दो, because
Mhm.
it is that sloganeering on the streets when lakhs of people come out on the streets and they say slogans like Aisha Banaun Pakistan Bata Rusti Batna. So it is actually, the sloganeering is actually, it reflects your mindset. although
Absolutely.
you try to cover up with so many false narratives. So Imara, it is very important for all of us and all the probably the the youngsters watching. This
Mm.
is very important that you make us understand what that jihadi mindset that you actually, which actually still is there in Kashmir as on date, but what were your like first hand experiences in that decade of 80s and 90s, and which actually is now slowly spilling over to the other states in India as well.
I honestly don't know where to start. This will have to be a 24-hour podcast for you if I if I tell
Yeah,
you the whole story.
you can speak for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, because I lived all my life till 91, but for 5 years, because I was in an insurance company. I worked for United India Insurance Company. I was there for many years. 82, I was a bachelor, still young in my 20s, and I went there as a branch manager. Now, uh, everything looked okay till about 86 happened. In 86, many of us know about what happened in Anantnag.
Another right.
You know, the one point that I want to really ram home and I really want to make clear is that
Right. Right.
history does not happen thus and thus. This is a quote by somebody,
Correct.
which means that any incident that happens today has its seeds in the past.
So yes.
Somebody sowed the seeds,
Mhm.
somebody watered it, and the tree kept growing
Right.
without the notice of those who became its victims later.
Right.
And that is the story of Kashmir.
Kashmir.
Any Kashmiri who has left Kashmir at any time, whether 100 years ago, 50 years ago, or 50 days ago, there was persecution behind that.
Right.
Trust me.
So, so,
So,
Bhushanji, sorry to
mhm,
interrupt here, but we see, I mean, state has been obviously, I mean, from last 700 years that all of us know, and as on date, like we say that, we are facing the genocide, and since 1947, we have been facing the denial of the genocide from the state. Koishumara Basan, the terms that the terminology is used by the state, like calling it cross-border terrorism, calling it just like kind of, just like, the law and order situation, that somehow demeans our genocide. Because it was jihad. It is jihad that culminated into genocide. Instead of using the right terminology, calling it as a cross-border terrorism and law and does that actually demean, because you were there, so that's why I am more interested in knowing from you. Toikitparchu, how do you look at that situation, and what are the right definitions and terminologies for it?
you know, when we talk about genocide, and if anybody says that it was anything else, you may call it mere politics, you may call it, but it's not only politics. There is a conspiracy behind that. I firmly believe in that. Because if Chandarhama, Vandahama, and Nandimark are not specimens, small specimens of a
Massacre.
long genocide,
Right,
massacre, genocide,
right,
then what is? What is? Then, we'll tackle that a little bit later, but let me go back to your previous question,
right.
that what happened and why is history is not a matter of, it doesn't happen in small incidents. There is a
Overnight.
preparation behind it. Yeah, there is preparation behind it. There is so much, going on behind it.
Right.
Apparently everything seemed all right between 50s and then 60s, regardless of what happened in the state politics and all. But 86
Mhm.
was a very, very dark year when in Anantnag, there were communal riots in February of, you know that time. Gul Shah was the chief minister there,
Mhm.
and it was very unfortunate. The person who said openly, "I'm a Pakistani," who said, the religion is under threat and all that. But that was a kind of a rehearsal for what is going to happen in the future.
But Bhushanji,
Now,
do you think it would be fair to call it communal rights or Anantnag rights? Because what we have learned, that obviously it was the majority community that perpetrated this atrocities on the minority, because
See, there,
because when we think of these these terminologies, because it was never a right, in right, two parties participate, over each other.
yes. You see,
And
yeah, in communal riots, maybe there is some disagreement. One community makes the other angry over some incidents, and there are some incidents.
right.
But this was not mere communal riots because of what followed, which we did not understand, which we did not know about.
Hmm.
Because after this 86 very, very sad episode of, Hindus being attacked,
Correct.
it's not even communal riots because how many Muslims were attacked back? Nobody
Exactly.
fought back.
That's the
So it
point.
is not communal riots at all. It was a
One sided. One
start
sided.
of ethnic cleansing. Yes. And then in 87, what was going on in Pakistan? Ziaul Haq was there, arms were coming.
Correct.
So everything was being prepared. The ground was being prepared.
Mhm.
In 87 or thereabouts, later 87, we understood. I was in Srinagar, witness to each and everything, as you said, till July of 91.
91.
Now we saw that everything, youth were going, from the valley, they were crossing the border. We had some Pakistani based terrorists coming to the valley and they were getting shelter and everything there.
Right.
And we used to hear in my office, I had my office in Regal Chowk in Munir Manzil, one whole floor at that time. We used to hear, for the first time we had heard the sound of the uh, guns in the
Gunshots.
distance, gunshots in the distance. And we
Right.
used to wonder what's happening till it came in the news that about 100 terrorists were actually nabbed by the police. There
Oh,
was
I
still
see.
a bit of administration there.
Correct.
But in 87 or late 87,
Right.
they were allowed to go. Now, if this is not a part of conspiracy, what is?
So you are saying that it was a part of the larger rehearsal of
It
99.
it was definitely,
Right.
but still people were afraid and they were not ready to unleash the whole thing
Right.
till they killed um, Taplu,
Technology.
Tiklalji Taplu. They killed on 14th of September. All
Right.
right, and let me tell you a small incident on 4th of November. I think it was a Saturday. We still went to office that day.
Right.
And Neelakant Ganju was in my office. He
Oh.
had retired.
Mhm.
We were sitting in the office. He came because I was a usual manager of the insurance company, as I told you,
Right.
and we used to give him motor accident cases, third party cases,
Oh,
to
the claim.
represent us legally in the court.
Right.
So he would visit our office very frequently. And by this time, we already had threats coming out in the newspapers. We already knew that Neelakant Gunju was being targeted.
Right.
That was in the news.
Right.
So the preparation was going on. Things were moving ahead from their point of view.
Right.
So I told him, Mara, please, I know that you are receiving threats from different places, different
Yes.
sources. Why do you
Yes.
come out so openly? Why don't you ask for a little bit? And he was nonchalant. Nothing will happen, nothing. After about 1.5 hours, he went to Hari Singh High Street
Right.
and he was shot dead. And there was scamper. Everybody was,
Was it the same day before the moment he
same
left?
day, same
Oh.
2 hours later. 2 hours later, after I spoke to him 2 hours before that, he was in my office, sitting in my office. And I was so shocked. I mean, everybody was shocked.
Yes.
So coming back to the point of 87, what was going on in Pakistan,
Right.
those preparations were being made. Then there was one trigger which unleashed everything,
Correct.
which was 8th of December when Mufti Mohammed Saeed was the home minister. He'd been home minister only for 5 days.
Right.
And the circumstances under which his daughter was kidnapped,
Right.
just outside, it all looked like stage managed, to be very honest.
Very stage match.
And then when those I.K. Gujral and Arif Muhammad Khan, they flew from Delhi to Srinagar
Correct.
to monitor the release of Rubaya Saeed.
Sahi.
All right. We were
Yes.
there.
Right.
That day, Kashmiris lost all fear. I used to tell everybody, and my wife used to, make fun of me on this. I used to tell her, nothing will happen here. We have police, even if we don't trust police, we have army around us.
Correct.
Army can shut them up in 24 hours.
Right.
What do we have to fear?
Correct.
So when this thing happened, um, when those 5 lakh to 10 lakh people came on the streets,
Right.
what were they celebrating? Not the release of Rubaya
Right.
Saeed. They were celebrating
Declaration.
know,
The proclamation.
yeah,
Yeah.
they were the release of those 5 dreaded terrorists.
Terrorist. Exactly.
And that is where the whole support system came. And
Yeah.
therefore, what happened on 19th January 1990 was only a culmination of these events.
Of those.
This is the point that I want to tell you.
So it's
This is very important.
very important for all of us to understand that this was not something very spontaneous, but it actually,
Yeah.
yeah, it slowly culminated, and there were rehearsals going on, reikis going on, the support was coming in, pouring in from the other side of the border. So Bhushanji, one more point very important for us to understand here is that, in the larger scheme of things, when we talk of the Kashmir situation, obviously there have been, the four key things that have come out of Kashmir. One is, you know the love for Pakistan, merger with Pakistan. Second is Azadi, which they call as independence. Third is like autonomy, self-rule, porous borders, dual currency, that kind of a narrative. And lastly, the narrative which was the narrative of India, that we Kashmiris want to go with the India. And I think majority was the Kashmiri Pandit community when it was cleansed of Kashmir in 1990. And I mean, actually taking you back post 1990, I think you are one of the very senior members of Panun Kashmir of those days, who were also, who organized the Panun Kashmir world, the first World Kashmiri Pandit Conference in 1993. And I have heard from a majority of senior leaders and other senior activists, like, what kind of an important and indispensable role you played in, like, drafting those memorandums, press release, going to embassies. How do you remember those days and that association? And and also, I also want to know from you, because the coexistence was rejected by the majority community, the perpetrators, with the support of the Pakistan. When the coexistence was rejected, so the only option left with the community is either go back and live in pre 1990, which is completely impossible. Second is operate like we see the government trying to set up some ghetto kind of, clusters, different districts, which is again a failed idea, because on the one notice of TRF, we see people running from there again. So obviously, when we think of those terms, the only possible and practical and pragmatic, the solution that comes to our mind is that the idea of Panun Kashmir, a separate homeland, which is, well within the ambit of Indian constitution. So you being one of the very senior ideologues and pioneers, how do you remember those days, and what was the euphoria those days, those times?
See, before coming to my role in Delhi, I had realized that this is not going to stop. You know, Lasakol, again, a great friend of mine, he was killed in February. They didn't stop in January.
They didn't stop there.
Between January, 1, 2, 3 months, almost 80%, 85% of the Kashmiri Pandits left the valley.
Well,
All right. I was transferred, but my transfer was cancelled. Many of my staff left the valley.
right.
Lasakol again spoke to me the same day
Mhm.
when he was killed, and
Right.
it was again a huge tragedy.
Correct.
Now, when I came to Delhi, I felt lost. I said, as if I have been, you know, torn out of my own roots. I was about to be kidnapped that time. I was living a life of danger. There are so many stories that I have. I have also drafted, done a first draft of a book of memoirs of those days,
Others.
which should come out in a year or so.
Oh,
So 93, 91, when I came to Delhi, I heard about Panun Kashmir and I was fascinated by the idea. And
right.
instead of trying to contact people and others,
Right.
I found that they were doing. We got great attention that time. Panun Kashmir did a great job that time. Let me tell you, we negated because I was in contact with some of these leaders like Abdul Ghani Lone and others, that Bhatt, Professor Bhatt and others. They told me once, that what we could not do with one full page of advertisement in New York Times or with so many guns and killings, you countered it with, because those days what we used to do is we used to tonsure our heads on the ghats of the Tavi
Tavi.
as a protest
Right.
against what happened to us.
Yes.
And some of those things appeared on the front pages of papers like Hindustan Times and others.
Times of India. Yes.
So instead of sort of telling them, oh, I'm going to join you or I'm going to do this, I am so and so, I just quietly appeared in one of the ghats and tonsured my head. And then I met
In fact, it's very important to mention here that I was speaking with Dr. Agni Shekhar. He told me when he conceived this idea, he
yes,
still
yes.
remembers that. I mean, your better half was the first person, to
Oh,
come and
she offered, yes. She said,
said,
even as a woman, I will tonsure my head.
yeah, and then
And everybody, yes,
said like that. That
yeah.
idea electrified.
Great. Yes, that was really great of her, and everybody remembers. I really respect her for that. Even today, that was really bold, and that was the kind of feeling everybody had.
the
We
passion.
wanted. We never took up guns. We never, did anything violent in our lives, and we always wondered, why is anybody wanting to completely cleanse us from our roots? What is the
Exactly.
logic? What kind of a thinking is this? What kind of mindset is this? Coming to that mindset briefly, that mindset is made, and even today that mindset perhaps is very difficult to correct, because those boys in Kashmir who were born after 1990, 29th of January,
Right.
what was the kind of conversation their parents had with them? Come to think of it, suppose I'm just giving this example so that I take you to the streets of Kashmir. Like somebody is walking Habakadal, Fatehkadal, Devan Bagh or any of those places. Imagine a Muslim gentleman having a child who is 4 years old, and he is taking him by his hand on the street, and the boy asks him, "What is this burnt house here?" Which
Wow.
is, okay. What does he tell him? Does he tell him that he was our great brother and unfortunately he left? If he does, he's a good guy. He doesn't want us to be cleansed. But
Yeah.
if he tells him he was a kafir and we had to burn his house,
Right.
he is already a jihadi.
He's
His
already,
mindset is done.
and he is further intoxicating. In
His mind is already that of a jihadi by when you give him that kind of, so that upbringing of those days of a whole generation,
right.
it's very difficult to reverse it, but so coming back to 93, yes, it was a great success after Mark Darshan 1993 World Conference in Delhi.
Right.
It was a great success. Dr. Agnishekhar, Ajay Srongu used to come to my home, and we used to sit from 10 p.m. till about 3 a.m. in the morning, drafting things, doing things.
Wow.
I was humbled, by the whatever little contribution I could make to that. Yeah.
And tell us something more about your, the with Dr. Agni Shekhar, Dr. Ajay Srangu. You had that Dharamshala visit where you guys went on to meet, I think, Sangdam Rinpoche, and I think
Yes.
the Dalai Lama.
Oh, it was a really great visit. We really enjoyed ourselves. And as I told you, they would come to my home, and uh, I want to remind both of them through this forum,
Right.
that they can go back to those days, because I had, we used to live in Delhi, and we used to live in a society.
Yes.
My son was 2 or 3 years old,
Right.
and he used to. We had 2 bedrooms, and
Mhm.
we had a bed for him, a single bed
Right.
for him, and where he used to sleep. But whenever Dr. Agni Shekhar and Ajay stayed in my place,
Right.
uh, we told them, look here, you sleep in the drawing room, because we had only
Oh my
another.
God.
But they would say, no, 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 we'll sleep in that small room.
Yeah.
And they would, hug each other and sleep in that single bed, both of them together.
Wow. Yes.
Okay. And
I hope they're listening.
my message to them is metaphorically do it again.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. So yes, those were days we went to McLeodganj, and I had my United India colleagues there. They gave us a car. We moved out, and we intended to meet Dalai Lama, but he was not there that time. And
Right.
we met Rinpoche, and he came to that World Conference, and he really
He was the
delivered
chief guest.
delivered a very very wonderful lecture. And that was the first time actually when we also we also had a lot of you know people getting associated,
Right.
including Anupam Kher. He came there. He came in Kashmiri Ferend. First time he got associated with the movement of Kashmiri Pandits and
Right.
Panun Kashmir.
Yes.
And we should actually do. It's a grand idea if India really, if our own nation, that is India, wants to reverse the ethnic cleansing and other things. Panun Kashmir has been a good idea, and it could still be implemented within the framework of Indian Constitution. We have never been anti-India. India is our great pride, and we are more patriotic than any other,
Right.
uh,
Correct.
person there.
Bhushanji, you have also served as a KOAC president in the past. That is Kashmir Overseas Association here in Canada. And I mean, everybody here in Canada, including me, we know that you have taken great socio-cultural initiatives in the past here. So I would like to know from you what what kind of hurdles that time, because it was way back. I think you were there in 2008, 9, 10. So what hurdles actually you faced that time, and what were your experiences, and how as a now, since that you had now immigrated to Canada. So what challenges you faced on ground? Taking that cause, and spreading it overseas, door to door here.
See, I came to Canada in 2002, and I knew some people already here and got involved in community activities. And at the very outset, I want to tell you that in Canada, we have a great community of Kashmiri Hindus, Kashmiri Pandits, and we have always been together.
Right.
And there may have been voices of disagreement here or there, but they are nothing very significant. That is, if when two people meet, they can always have two different opinions. We
Excellent.
always have been a united lot, and we have always presented that united picture to the whole world.
Exactly.
Although we also made, initially it all started with helping people in Kashmir. We
Yes.
used to, those who had come before me, who are the founding fathers of KOAC,
Do it.
they did a great job. Oh, there are a lot of people. There are many of them who had already laid the foundation of the
Right.
organization.
Right.
And from time to time, we collected thousands and thousands of dollars and sent it over into the camps to be able to help our brethren out there.
Mhm.
And as time passed, we also did. We had a registered charitable organization called Sharika Foundation,
Right.
and we also had another wing, ICKF, representing the political aspects of our journey here.
Right.
And it was a great pleasure to be involved with QOC management for 4 years. And I was there in 2010 when we raised a lot of money
Mhm.
for Sharika Foundation. I was involved in that, although Sharika Foundation played an equally greater role, Munshi and others, the whole group. We My experience has been great so far, but only thing is that now we have grown quite a bit, and we need a better structure. We
Right.
need a better way of going forward,
Yeah.
and that is what I hope that we'll be working on in the next few months and years to come.
And do you think, Bhushanji, that there was any, kind of a mission or a cause that you started with KOAC that still, needs to, that remained finished, or that still needs to be taken care of? And how do you think? I mean, KOAC today, when we talk of like all those, that kind of, the fundraising you guys did for the Sharika Foundation, do you think that still needs to come to a conclusion, or, given a better shape?
See, a lot of people have been thinking about it, that we should have some place of our own, some place, some kind of a piece of land and other things. It's a great idea,
Mhm.
but we are not there yet. You know,
Right.
it needs more work. As I said, we need to be more structured with a purpose which is very visible before us,
Right.
with aims and objectives that have to be very visible. We have still to work on that,
On that.
but the community at large is very, very aware of its needs.
Right.
And as I said, we're a very vibrant community. We do Herath here wonderfully well. We do Diwali here. We
Diwali.
do Havan,
Right.
and Havan is so enjoyable an event for all Kashmiris, and we do a picnic. So we try to, you know, and when I was there, I also tried that we did Kashmiri skits.
Right.
So my emphasis was that we should have a focus on trying to promote Kashmiri.
And culture. Right. Exactly.
Kashur Hichu, Kashur Buliu, Ashkur Tatmas Kafi quizzes, Ashkur Kashur play arc. So you can even see it today. It was a very funny play,
Right.
and everybody enjoyed.
Mhm.
So those kinds of activities are absolutely important,
Right.
and that's where I say there has to be need for a vision correction. What do we stand for? We say culture, 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 but what culture?
Right.
What's the role of language there? What's the role of knowing our true history there? What's the role of our symbols there?
Correct.
What's the role of Kashmir Shaivism there? What's the role of those thousands of temples which have different types of significances with our Ishtadevatas? What do they mean for us?
Exactly.
All these things, our present leadership or others, they have to answer those things, and we have to come up. I'm not saying they have to do it without the involvement of others. Everybody has to get involved into that.
Altogether, yes. That's right.
Yes. And Kashmiri, my children speak Kashmiri very well, very
That's
well. In fact,
wonderful.
I was, my elder son, both of them speak Kashmiri very well, or we speak at home also. That has to be preserved, and not only preserved, but it has also to be
Fast forward. Fast.
nurtured,
Exactly.
you know. And we have to make progress in that. We have to create those stories. We have to know about Laldet. We have to know about our poets, poetesses,
Correct.
and our great tradition of the past. We have to know how uh, Kashmir has contributed to philosophy, how Kashmir has contributed to uh,
Different aspects.
diplomacy, everywhere, everything. We have to know more about it. Probably a few of us should come together and make a uh, a program
Right.
where which can be pursued and which can be brought to a
Right.
conclusion.
Absolutely. I completely agree on that part. And, like we say that every passing day as a community, we are, facing or nearing the extinction. And I think it becomes very important. This should actually send a very strong, I mean, this should be a matter of inspiration for others. Because if somebody like you sitting thousands of kilometers away from India can make his kids talk in Kashmiri. We talk, we talk very high. We talk of reversal of cultural genocide. Magar, I think the very first step is Kashmir pat kath karo, yata is Kashmir pati kath karo, pan zaban mazi kath karo. So how can we actually, make other things survive? Let us say you talked about poets, poetesses, great heritage, ancestry, descendancy, our food, our cuisines, and all those things. Memarach Bhushanji Bey, it's a very important question in this show because obviously as a Kashmiri Pandit community based in India, nobody denies that diaspora, Kashmiri Pandit diaspora, be it in Canada, be it in US, or be it in other countries or other parts of the world, they have definitely contributed to Kashmiri Pandits since 1990, be it scholarships, be it some kind of medical aid or help. But there is a very strong notion, I mean, and which cannot be denied, that the way other diasporas, let us say Kashmiri Muslim diaspora, let us say other diasporas that we see here, the way they have contributed. Kashmiri Pandit diaspora hasn't contributed that way. And when we look at it at in a comparative way. And also, secondly, Bhushanji, we recently had a long 300-day employee agitation, wherein the employees were actually, and obviously you know that because you also sent out a memorandum in their support. But my question is, that 300-day long agitation where those boys and girls and our sisters and brothers were basically fighting for their right of survival, for their freedom to live, from the freedom to survive, and which was exploited to the core. And as on date, you and I speak, they're still held hostages there. Can you tell me, because not all the diaspora, but there are certain prominent faces and figures in our Kashmiri Pandit diaspora, be it in Canada or US, who did play a very negative role, who actually created more confusion within the diaspora, trying to defame these boys and girls, and which actually majority of us took a very strong objection back home in India. So, how should we as a community, counter such, or I mean, take care of such black sheeps? I would very brazenly call them, in this such a situation.
First things first, let me come to the first point you made, which is our contribution or the perception about our contribution. These are actually two different things. And
Right,
a more pressing need of Kashmiri Pandits is to present ourselves as one voice. You know, I have a slightly different take on this because if you think of any other community in the world, whether it is Jews or others, or say our Muslim brothers in the valley,
right,
trust me, they're equally divided, or maybe sometimes even more. But the point is, the narrative they send out
is unified. That's right.
is unified,
Exactly.
which we have not been able to do.
Mhm.
Okay, probably divided is not the right word. Even we have different opinions about how to handle things. But
Exactly.
there is something very basic which every single, as I said in the beginning, that whether a Kashmiri Pandit left the valley 100 years ago or 100 days ago, he left because of persecution, because of pain.
Because
Some suffered a lot more, like me and my family, and like my Matamal. Others suffered less,
like the Jallianwala massacre you just mentioned.
but every single person suffered because we lost our roots.
Exactly.
We lost our connection to that wonderful valley, great valley. And when there is discussion about these things, we they say, okay, the number of people that have died in your community is not that many. I say every single person that has lost his home has been killed.
Exactly.
So count the numbers. Don't compare it us in that fashion.
It's an entire
And this is the entire community. This genocide has to be reversed, and this genocide has to be recognized in Parliament in India. I have always advocated that.
right.
And the government of India should not do the mistake of ignoring it, that they are smaller numbers.
Exactly.
I said it long back in '93 when we were invited as Panun Kashmir activists. We were invited to different embassies to
Right.
give our take to them. I said it in the British embassy to a French diplomat who was French diplomat in Pakistan. He had come here and he wanted Panun Kashmir's input.
And which year this was, sir?
This was 90. Narasimha Rao was the prime minister at that time,
Oh,
93 or 94 or thereabouts. So I told him, look here. He said, why should Narasimha Rao care about you? This was his question,
right.
you know. And I said to him, if he doesn't care about us, he will not care about India. Because if we are driven out, then this can be the story of any other part of India anytime. Maybe 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, he was quiet.
Exactly.
So that narrative, our contribution has been there. And we have to find a centralized common leadership which becomes the single leadership of Kashmiri Hindus. That is important.
Right.
And one of the fundamental reasons for that is that if anything happens to a Kashmiri, any other community anywhere,
Right.
it is shared by everybody else.
Exactly.
Now, for us, unfortunately, if anything, that brings me back to your second part about the agitating employees, which I put forward an argument when there were some descendants. Oh, we should not bother about this. There are only 200. I
Exactly.
said, look
That
here,
that was the
that
punchline.
is absolutely unfortunate. That is unfortunate. Even if a single Kashmiri Pandit is persecuted directly, indirectly, whether in the form of not being given his salaries or any other form,
Right.
everyone should stand for him.
Exactly.
Even
And
if you have a personal agenda,
very quickly, sir, I mean, this has been a tendency, particularly amongst our Kashmiri Pandit organizations, whether they are in India or they are overseas. When I talk specifically of social, cultural, or religious bodies, they try to kind of shed away their responsibilities. ये हमारा अच्छे political event askya चाहत statement doing we are apolitical. I mean, how do you take that? Is that even
no,
that
that
the
no,
world down the throat?
nothing is apolitical in this world. And when we make a statement about this, why is it political in the first place? We are supporting employees. You have to look at it the way you see it. Somebody is suffering. A Kashmiri Pandit has been persecuted for hundreds of years. And if somebody is suffering today, issuing a statement in favor of him or supporting his demands,
Right.
what is political about it? We have to merge these so-called divisions in our own minds. Oh, this is something which is
Yes.
political. This is something that is not political.
Right.
No, it is. If anything happens to a single Kashmiri Pandit anywhere, we should all give him
Or all
support.
stand up in one voice,
Of course, not for
regardless of
anything. You see,
right.
you have to think of it this way also. जो भी कश्मीर में जहाद चल रहा था, was that legal? Wasn't that criminal?
Right.
But even then, they got support from general population.
Yes.
Now, are these people doing anything criminal? They are asking for their rights.
Rights.
Why can't you support? Why so many questions?
Correct.
So, to other part, those who are sort of disrupting this process or doing something like that,
Right.
ignore them. That's the only thing you can do. And work on a unified central voice. Whosoever comes forward, support him.
Right.
And remember this principle that pain to one Kashmiri Pandit is pain to all Kashmiri Pandits.
Community. Yes. And that's a very positive, and I think it's a very positive and a very strong message from you. And Bhushanji, I have to say this that I am running out of time, but we have a question and answer session at the end of this show.
Sure.
So, my backend team has just texted me two questions from two viewers. One is, in fact, one is a viewer, other is an activist of Panun Kashmir. So, I'll take from this young boy, Vishwesh Bhat from Udhampur. He was watching you live, and he has texted this question to, I think, Nitin, and he says, Namaskar, Bhushan ji. As a community, that you have, just told us all the concerns and everything. What do you think, as a community and as a diaspora, it should be, one step that should be taken on the war footing, especially, so basically what he means by, I was just trying to read his post, that what is the one point which is very important as a community that we should be doing as of now without wasting any further time.
Everything that involves our survival, we should never forget our roots. We should never forget our language. We should never forget where we come from.
Right.
And if there is any takeaway from this today's discourse, it
Right.
is that we have to live and we have to continue living as Kashmiri Pandits of very proud tradition and very proud heritage.
Wonderful. And I think that this would be the last question of the day. This comes from Chandji Jammu, and he says, Bhushanji, uh, do you think that the genocide enactment of the genocide law in India is not only important from Kashmiri Pandit perspective, but also from the perspective of state of India, who can actually, by virtue of having a genocide bill and a law in the country, can prevent the other the upcoming genocides in the country.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with that more. And when we prepared that memorandum, which was signed by 9 of us here in Canada, we did make this, we did make this point that we have been a minority and we are being persecuted. And we did make this point that there should be a Supreme Court appointed judge who should investigate the incident. When I was telling you the incidents about 86, 87, when they released those, or when Rubaya Saeed was,
Yes, the
all
killers
these
of
things. Now,
Kashmir.
how come those people were friends again? It was
Correct.
a conspiracy.
Conspiracy.
All that has to be investigated. What happened in 86, what happened in 87, 88, 89, all that has to be investigated. And the those demands, like our temples should be restored to us. I think there is some recently now something has been done. SIT has been appointed, and all those symbols which are important
We have
for our
lost.
existence,
Yes.
they have to be restored.
Exactly.
And whether they give it the name genocide or anything else, it
Right.
has to be absolutely investigated, so that there is truth and reconciliation. You see, I told you in 47 they had to go back to the same place. We should go back with dignity, and that dignity will come only when truth is acknowledged.
Right.
And there's a handshake after truth. You are telling us he is your killer. Now I am getting you in front of him. He is not even admitting that he has killed you or your people. You
Right.
handshakes with him and you embrace him. That's
Correct.
not going to happen.
Hmm.
Not that in that way.
Right.
So it's very important that truth is brought out
Right.
and it's
The,
published.
the genocide commission and inquiry.
Yes, genocide, everything is done, and after that, yes, hope that satisfies.
Right. Obviously.
Yeah, you.
Bhushanji, it was absolutely pleasure to have you here on the show and keep guiding us in Rozancho Karan, Canada's first. And we will definitely want to you have in upcoming panel discussions also. Thank you and a great pleasure, sir, having you here.
Absolutely, to you and your team and to all the viewers. I'm so pleased to have expressed a bit of my mind. As I said, that if I have to, continue doing it, it will take hours and hours and hours. But I'll record the whole events at some stage in future,
And I
near
would
future.
definitely, on that parting note, I will definitely request you, that you were referring those testimonials, audio, video, recordings that you had of
Yes, yes, yes,
Hama
yes.
massacre. Do put it on a public platform, so that
Yeah.
people come and learn and know more about the massacres and genocide in
Right,
the community. That is.
right, right, right.
Thank you so much, sir,
Okay.
and I'll see you all my viewers and audience on a next episode of the Homeland Postcard. Totan diyu ijazat. Jai Panun Kashmir.